In this video we're going to have a closer look at how we can get input from the user and the different types of input that we can get from them. In the previous video we looked at this potential example, getting the user to enter a name and then adding it to an output statement. It's really important to note that input is always, using this input function, is always creates a string. So that's the same even if they type in a number, it's not going to be the number in the sense of a number, rather a string of characters that just happen to be numbers but aren't used as numbers within the program. So that might sound a little bit confusing, but if we look at an example it will hopefully become more clear. So here if we get the user to enter in a cost of something, so maybe 5 for example, if we then try and add that 5 to what's already stored in the variable, it will cause an error. That's because it's recognized the 5 as a string and not as an integer. If we have a look at this example, in reality we can see what's going to happen. If I run this code and I enter an additional cost of 5, you can see now that we have another error message coming up saying unsupported operand type, and here it's talking about int and string. So remember, we have lots of different data types, including integers, which are whole numbers, and strings, which are just characters made up of text. And in this case we're trying to add a string to an integer, which doesn't work. That's because even though we typed in 5, it's actually stored as the string 5 rather than the integer 5. Also worth noting is this line of code that we have here. Remember that in programming, when we have an equal sign like this, it doesn't mean equivalency like it does in maths. What it means is we're taking what's on the right hand side, and that value is then stored in the variable name that we have on the left hand side. So this allows us to do things like we have here, where we have already said that total cost is equal to 10, and then in this case we're adding whatever is typed in to total cost and then storing that result in the variable total cost. We can actually write this in shorthand. Rather than having total cost equals total cost plus cost, we can just go plus equals. So total cost is equal to itself plus cost. Okay, but what are we going to do to make this work? Well, we have to convert this input into an integer. So what we can do is we can surround this input function with the int function. So if I just cut that out and I'll type in the int function with the brackets to start with, anything that we put inside those brackets is going to be converted to an integer. So for example, if I put in the number 10 as a string, because it's got these quotes around it, that will then be converted to the integer 10, and then this will give us 20 as a result. So I actually need to have a print statement there, and we'll put in the variable as well. Okay, so now if I run that, you'll see it says total cost is 20. So it's taken the string, converted it to an integer, and then added it to the original total cost. Okay, so let's paste back in that code that we had before, which was our input function. So all we've done is replaced that string that was in the middle there with our input function, this section here, which will return or create a string. So whatever we type in will be stored as a string and then converted to an integer because of the int function, and then stored in cost. So let's run that again. Enter additional cost, let's say 7 this time, and we should get 17 as a result. So there we go, that's working correctly. Be really careful when you're doing this. At the end there you're going to have 2 closing brackets. The brackets always have to match up. This first one matches this one here, and then the second one matches our opening bracket there. It's a really common error to omit that, and if we do that, we'll see that we get an error, just like we talked about back in the first video. This one, the error shows up on line 5, which is down here, even though the error is at the end of line 3. So remember, the error is only recognized down here, so have a look at the end of the line before, and you can find that you need to put your closing bracket there, and now it will run as we would want it to. So once you've had a go at playing around with that a few times, it's guessing game challenge again. So now we need to add a couple of little lines of code. We're going to ask the user to enter a number, and then we're going to convert that number to an integer, and I want you to print it out and display it on the screen so that you can see that it's worked correctly. Pause the video now and get that up and running. Okay, so here's my version of the guessing game so far. I've just added this one line of code actually. I've got a variable that I've called guess, and we've got the input function in the middle, and we've got enter your guess as the text we want to show on the screen, and that's converted to an integer. Then I just need to print out the variable guess just to check that that's worked as we want. So I'll run that, and we'll have a look on the right hand side here. And let's enter 15, and we'll just get 15 back. Now nothing happens yet, but if we think ahead to what we're going to need to do, we're going to need to generate a random number and then compare this guess that has just been entered to that randomly generated number.